Hi, welcome back to class, and we are on Module 2. And so this week we are moving on to the second and third chapter of the textbook. If you haven't received a textbook yet, I'd like for you to send me an email at my Black Hill State email address, and we'll figure a plan out for you. But if you have, it is time to get working. And the majority of this chapter can actually be done without a textbook, as the quiz will only be due in 2 weeks. So I do extend out 2 weeks for each chapter. But I'll get going with what we have. This looks like a lot of stuff, but it's not too overwhelming. I remember in a summer session we are condensing a 16-week class into 8 weeks. So you will see basically double the work you do in a normal week of class. But I'm doing a technique called weaving with our education. So I'm going to pull forward some ideas from earlier in the book and strand some things into later weeks. And this will make things go a little more seamlessly for you. So this week we're going to move on to chapters 2 and 3, and that looks into the nature of social policy, looking at how policies are implemented, and looking at policy analysis. We'll also look at how the field of social work really began. So this is a really fascinating section, and one that I like to spend a little more time on than we get. So we'll pull some of these ideas forward with our weaving techniques here with our schooling. So we're going to use discussion boards to do that. And so this week you're going to read chapter 2 and 3. Make sure you go back to the introduction discussion and read every single person's initial post. I think last time I checked there were 10 people who were posting on there. So there's still a couple people that haven't started yet, so hopefully they get going. But read everyone's initial post and respond to at least 3 of your classmates. And when I say at least 3, you could go ahead and respond to more if you'd like. I'd love to see people really get involved in the discussions and go all out with that. But I will give you credit for that at the end of this week, so make sure you get that done. And then you're going to move on to the chapter 2 discussion. I do have that mislabeled. That will be module 1. I'm sorry, so module 1 discussion. But I still have it labeled as a chapter 1. And this is to get you used to the idea of our discussion boards. So last week you posted your initial post into the module 1 board. This week you'll go back to that and read your classmates' posts and start responding to each other. You have to respond on 3 different days at a minimum, and at least one thread on each of the one person on each of the threads. So there's 2 threads that week. You'll have to respond to one person on one thread one day, one person on a thread the next day, on the other thread that day too. Then log off, give it some time. Maybe somebody will respond back after you responded, and you can have an actual discussion. If not, when you log back on the next day, you can go on from there. This doesn't take too long to really figure out, but it's a slightly different style than a lot of teachers use. It just works well for this style of class. So you move on through that discussion 1, and then there's videos. Make sure you have your Jennifer Granholm and Eugene Bardak Dropbox assignment done. That's due the end of this week. I assigned that last week, and again, those are from they're from a Berkeley School of Public Policy. And I was lucky enough when they put together a MOOC. Larry Rosenthal, who put that together, gave me permission to use those videos in my classes. So he has some really good interviews in there. Bardak wrote the first great policy analysis books in this country, and Jennifer Granholm, being the former governor of Michigan, is full of information. So you have access to them. And then there's actually a video later on that is available this week with Robert Reich, and he's the former Secretary of Labor, and so he does an interview with them as well. So we will use more of their information. It's good videos and great information. Then I have a couple of videos on Whole House, and that is really seen as a major pivot in the development of social policy. So the people who put that together, amazing group of women, and they've done some really amazing things. And so you're going to watch the videos on Whole House, complete an associated Dropbox, and you'll get a lot of information. It's amazing the amount of stuff that they did, and I think you'll be blown away by it. Then there's the Chapter 2 and 3 quizzes. Those are open for 2 weeks. So if you time this out right, you can get these done without much stress. If not, you'll be working at the end of those 2 weeks trying to get them done. But I give you 2 weeks. That's plenty of time to get these done. And like I said, hopefully you'll have your books. If not, get in touch with me. And then you post your initial thread, your initial post to discussion 2. So hope you see what we're doing here is we're going to be weaving our discussions as you're posting your discussion 2 initial posts on this week. You'll be responding to discussion 1. And I'll explain more of this later on. It sounds like it's really silly, but as you get used to it, it makes a lot of sense, and it makes the class actually have a very good discussion. So as crazy as it sounds, there's a reason for it, and it will make sense to you. Trust me. And then I also want you to think about an existing social policy that you'd like to improve. And this should be pretty easy for you. You've been taking classes in sociology and human services. I'm sure you could think of something that's not working as well as it should. So something that you think you could put a suggestion out to make better. This is for an assignment we're going to put out next week, but it's the start of our papers we're going to write. And then you have the Robert Reich interviews, and there's a Dropbox associated with that. That is due on the 14th, so you have 2 weeks for that. So you have some time. And again, I'll put together a checklist. I don't have that up yet, but I will get that up with this video. Once your checklist is complete, read chapter 4 of the textbook. I need to change this here. All these assignments are due next week unless otherwise noted. So in going through how you're going to see the layout, we'll just work down here. So you'll have the video here for week 2, your assignment page that we just went over, chapter 1 discussion. So here's your post that you're going to be responding on this week. Then you have the Whole House videos, and these are right here. They're from YouTube, but you can click on the video if you want. You can click the YouTube icon, get a little bigger, and have access to the video. Watch the videos and answer these questions. And module 2 discussion. I will take this out of here. So that's there we go. That's gone. Module 2 discussion forum, and you're going to have these two threads. The first one is mixed approach, and so this chapter, the first chapter, on chapter 2 that we're going over this week, we're going to be looking at political ideology. That's a real trap for some of us. People identify as being a liberal or a conservative, and they think they have to work down those lines. A mixed approach would be how you would design a successful policy, and so you would take a policy and say, here's my policy, and then a mixed approach would be you would discuss some aspects of the policy that people who might see themselves as being on the conservative side of the spectrum, as well as people on the liberal side of the spectrum could get to the same conclusion that the policy is a good idea. A good example that would be California's three-strike law. There was a group of people pushing to abolish that, and the argument they made that was a mixed approach was, hey, for the conservatives, this is very expensive. We're throwing people in jail for a long time for numerous petty offenses. There's a better way to do this. The way they approached the liberal thinking people was along the lines of, this is not socially correct to be treating people this way, and it's disproportionately hurting certain communities. And so with the mixed approach, they're able to go for a discussion that gets to look at the policy instead of hanging up on ideology. And then the next question is on advocacy. And after watching the Whole House videos and reading chapter 3, you should be able to answer how feminist ideas influenced early social workers. And so that should not be a difficult post to make, especially with the information you'll have. And we have our quizzes and a link to the Robert Reich interview, which is not due for a little while here, but that will move on. And then I have PowerPoints for each chapter. They go over some key concepts. I'll just quickly go over some things that I normally go over in class, but again, these are all in the book. We're going to be sticking with the policies in the book for the most part. Towards the end of the class, I will get to some current events. It's very tempting to really jump right in right now to current events, but if I do that, I think we won't get to all the information in the class, so we'll hold back on that a little bit. but the temptation is there to really dive into what's going on in the news today. So chapter 2, you're going to go over the identification of social problems, and then what happens when you have a problem, the policy window. And so when there's an event, the case I overuse every semester is a school shooting. Whenever there is a school shooting, a policy window opens. You could pretty much determine what's going to happen. There's going to be, some people pushing to maybe do some gun bans. There might be some other people pushing to increase security in a school, and other people say, well, let's maintain the status quo. Well, the idea that people start talking about that is the policy window. And the reason I always overuse school shootings is because they happen almost every semester, and we get to discuss the window, what's going to happen, and look at that a little further. Looking at social policies, we do go a few different ways. One is to try to solve the problem. One is to ameliorate the problem, making it a lot less than it was before. There's also efforts to avoid the problem. And later on, I'll get into some efforts to make a problem worse. There is that with policy as well. As hard it is to believe that there's people that do want to make social problems worse for some people. This chapter looks at social welfare policies and then gets into some of the different ideologies. Again, I hope you don't get hung up on those. Actions by the government. The shared values. This is very important. So as you read through the chapter, try to think of things that bind us together instead of always split us apart. And then looking at policy analysis. That's what we'll get into more in the class, but we don't go too deep into it. And then public-private sector cooperation. I'm sure everybody saw SpaceX successfully launching a group of 2 astronauts into space and attaching them to the space station. It was pretty amazing. And then chapter 3, that PowerPoint goes through the development of social policy. A lot of this book really sticks with that. So it looks into Jane Addams and the people we're going to cover with Whole House. I don't want to lock onto this too much right now in my discussion, because next week as I move in to chapter 4, I will have some more to say here. But I want you to read about it and watch the Whole House videos. And